Welcome back to Yoshi Entertainment, everybody. So as we all know, P. Devil Combs, which we've been calling him that on this channel as of recent, has been just recently, breaking news, of course, everybody, indicted on federal charges, y'all know I have to say allegedly, on alleged trafficking and racketeering charges. Now, like I said before, I have to say allegedly, but I believe everything. I believe everything that this man has been accused of. And people have made excuses, constant excuses. There have been a plethora of people who've been trying to expose this dude since like the 90s. But every time somebody came to the media and tried to expose what he has done, they were called haters. They were told that they were just trying to extort him and get money from him. They were said to be, just trying to take some black man down, even though allegedly this black man took other black men down, along with a plethora of black women, messed over a whole bunch of people in the community and outside the community, but mostly in the community. But people in the community constantly made excuses because they were so far worshiping this man and what legacy that they claim he has, which is not a legacy of anything except screwing people over and traumatizing people generation after generation, decade after decade. His legacy is a legacy of hurting people, traumatizing people, monetizing off of the hard work of other people. Once again, there are people really fixing their raggedy mouths to saying that people were trying to extort him or blackmail him because they're suing him for what he has allegedly done to them. Meanwhile, he's been out here once again for decades, allegedly, doing the textbook definition of blackmailing people, allegedly extorting people by having evidence of them doing things that's very compromising, telling them, if you say XYZ, this is what I'm gonna do. Anyways, before we get into this lawsuit, we're gonna take a little trip down memory lane, take a little trip to the textbook so that we can get some people, help some people to understand what human trafficking is. Because there are some people that are still acting like they don't understand what trafficking is. So we're going to remind everybody real fast what this is, because this is allegedly, as I say it, y'all know I have to say allegedly, one of the things he's being indicted on, one of the things he has federal charges concerning. Human trafficking, also known as trafficking in persons, is a crime that involves compelling or coercing a person to provide labor or services or to engage in commercial sex acts. The coercion can be subtle or overt, physical or psychological. Exploitation of a minor for commercial sex is human trafficking, regardless of whether any form of force, fraud, or coercion is used. Once again, you don't have to be physically moved in order for it to constitute as trafficking. You don't have to be whacked over the head and thrown over somebody's shoulder, put in somebody's car, and transported from one location to another one. This has to do with being forced to provide services, commercial sex acts, some kind of labor for the benefit of another human being forced to do those things, being coerced, because whether people want to believe it or not, that is manipulation. There are people who know how to get into a person's head psychologically and get them to do these things. It's very messed up, and some people don't think that's an actual thing, which is really sickening because it happens every day. And unfortunately, it goes unseen sometimes because people don't think it's real, but it's very real, and it happens, like I said, every day. Once again, people want to scoff at these kind of charges because they keep asking, well, he didn't transport any of these people went to him. First of all, you don't know that. Allegedly, they're claiming that he may have transported some people. Remember the lawsuit we talked about right on this channel? The 17-year-old, she was 17 at the time, she's an older lady now, who made accusations that she was transported across state lines allegedly, put on a plane and taken from one location to another to a studio where she was R-worded, allegedly, according to this young lady, by him and another person. So some people, they think because of the word trafficking, you have to be moved. Once again, that is not the truth. All it takes is a little bit of research. People don't want to read these days. People don't want to look up the definition of stuff, especially before they go onto the internet and say a bunch of stuff about people they don't know who have been through things that they could not fathom. Another point that people need to pay attention to, because as I've heard many people say, if they don't get anybody on anything, if they can't get anybody on any kind of charges when they know they've been doing wrong, Some things that they will definitely nail people to the wall over is trafficking, RICO charges, and racketeering. One very important point to remember about human trafficking is if there is a minor involved, it does not matter if that minor was forced, coerced, or manipulated. If they are being exploited to any degree, according to the definitions listed, it is automatically trafficking because they are a minor. So low-key, they're really trying to tell y'all by telling y'all what he's being charged with without telling y'all what he was out here doing. All of the allegations of him trafficking minors, not just moving them from point A to point B, like I said before, because it's more to that than just that. Him having them at those alleged parties, those freak-offs, allegedly, as many people have been saying and claiming and alleging. That's why this is so horrible, besides all the other things that he was out here allegedly doing to people. Now, this article also goes on to talk about how trafficking victims can be anybody. It doesn't matter what race, what color, whether you have a disability or not, can be anybody. So try to refrain from looking at any one or other person and say, oh, I doubt that they would be trafficked. It doesn't have anything to do with looks or anything of that nature. It has to do mostly with the vulnerability, availability. So once again, it could be literally anybody. Somebody older, middle-aged, a child, an adult. Now, while that is true, there have been some patterns observed. Usually there are a group of people who are preyed upon a little bit more, people who have more vulnerabilities. And I quote, traffickers around the world frequently prey on individuals whose vulnerabilities, including poverty, limited English proficiency, or a lack of lawful immigration status, are exacerbated by lack of stable, safe housing and limited economic and educational opportunities. Trafficking victims are deceived by false promises of love, a good job, or a stable life and are lured or forced into situations where they are made to work under deplorable conditions with little or no pay. In the United States, trafficking victims can be American or foreign citizens, end quote. Once again, reinforcing the truth that it can be anybody. Like I said, there is a pattern to who the people who victimize people like this will target. We talked about this some time ago with the lawsuit concerning The Dream, which we renamed him The Nightmare on this channel. Whenever the young lady filed a lawsuit against him, she was not from the U.S. She did not know her way around. She was struggling. He promised to help her career, promised to help her keep a job, made it seem like he was going to take care of her and help her, only to allegedly, according to this young lady, trap her in a situation where he was taking advantage of her horrendously, allegedly. Some young women, a lot of young ladies have to understand that some of these men in these situations, that is what they'll do. They know that a lot of young women like to be taken care of, let's just be honest. And there's nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, some men will take advantage of that. They'll go to women who are in some bad situations, who are struggling, who, are barely making ends meet, who don't have anybody who they can depend on. That's another thing, not having family and friends who you can trust, depend on to be there for you. And they'll say, listen, I know you're struggling. I know you want somebody to depend on. You want somebody to take care of you. Make sure you're good and you don't have to struggle or be on the streets. I can do that for you. But in exchange, they put them through hell. They take advantage of them. They take out all the lustful and perverted ideologies and things of their flesh, so to speak, onto these women that they don't want in exchange for helping them. And it should not be that way. Now, as for the location, and I quote, victims can be found in legal and illegal labor industries, including child care, elder care, the drug trade, massage parlors, nail and hair salons, restaurants, hotels, factories, and farms. In some cases, victims are hidden behind doors in domestic servitude in a home. Others are in plain view, interact with people on a daily basis, and are forced to work under extreme circumstances in exotic dance clubs, factories, or restaurants, end quote. And there's a little bit more that they talk about concerning that, which is why we need to be careful and mindful whenever we're going to certain places. Be paying attention, because there could be somebody, they could be smiling at you, doing their job wherever they are, and then behind closed doors, they could be being forced to do other things. They could be working for free for all you know. So we must be mindful, we must be discerning. This is why there is an importance that needs to be placed upon companies entities, so to speak, that check up on employees, that make it very hard for people to traffic individuals. This is also why I absolutely hate places like strip clubs. A lot of people go to those places to indulge in their fantasies, to use and observe those women and men, because there are some men who are in those industries, in order to fulfill the ungodly lust of their flesh. Meanwhile, they don't even know and don't even care that some of those people are being forced in those positions. All these movies and TV shows that have, quite frankly, spat in the face of victims by making it seem like being a stripper is something to be, working at a club, those kind of places, is done an injustice, because a lot of those people, some of those people, I'll say, I can't say a lot because I don't know everybody's situation, but I believe some of those people are in some very compromising positions. And those are industries where they do these kind of things, and it goes under the radar because people aren't thinking about that. They're just thinking about, again, the lust of their flesh and how they can get off. Like I said, which is why I hate those kind of places. People don't even think about this whenever they go down there. Speaking of things they don't think about, and I quote, victims can be exploited for commercial sex in numerous contexts, including on the street, in illicit massage parlors, cantinas, brothels, or through escort services and online advertising. Trafficking situations can be found across the U.S. Again, so many people are just wrapped up in satisfying their lust and perverse thoughts. They don't consider that people in these positions can be being trafficked. Online, OnlyFans for all you know, porn websites, escort services, thinking, oh, they're just doing this to make a little money. Yeah, for somebody else probably. That is why, once again, I detest those kind of industries and environments, because once again, you never know what is going on. People know out there, these people who run these industries and exploit people, they know that a lot of people are very weak in the area of lust, and all they have to do is have some very exploited, perverted things going on, and they will draw people. Before anybody thinks of indulging in these things, they need to be thinking about these kind of situations, how people are being exploited and used in some of the most horrendous ways you would not be able to imagine. Now, once again, traffickers can be anybody. And I quote, traffickers can be pimps, gang members, diplomats, business owners, labor brokers, farm, factory, and company owners. This website also mentions that there have been cases, prosecuted cases, that the U.S. has done against women traffickers. Yes, traffickers can be women. They can also actually be minors as well. There have been situations where there were children who were recruited by adults. Well, the adults would be the main ones, but they go out and get other children to traffic children. So it could quite literally almost be anybody, which is the sad part. It's very sad how this is like it's a whole layered thing that you have to think about and be mindful of. Now, let's talk about racketeering for just a moment, because that's another thing that was caught up in all of this. And I quote, the term racketeering broadly refers to criminal acts, typically those involving extortion that involve a racket being some sort of scheme organized to extract illegal profits. It is usually used in reference to patterns of illegal activity specified in the Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act, known as RICO. This is a U.S. federal law that makes it illegal to acquire or control a business through certain crimes or income from those crimes. It is also illegal to participate even indirectly in certain crimes committed by a business or to conspire to do any of the above under the act, end quote. So a lot of people want to know how this ties up or how this is somehow applying to P. Devil Combs. Well, I'm so glad you all inquired about that, because this article then goes on to state, and I quote, the list of federal crimes specified in RICO includes bribery, fraud, gambling offenses, money laundering, financial and economic crimes, obstructing justice or a criminal investigation, and murder for hire. At the state level, racketeering can include crimes such as murder, kidnapping, gambling, arson, robbery, bribery, extortion, dealing in obscene matters, and drug crimes, as long as they align with the generic definition of the state offense referenced at the time RICO was enacted, end quote. All of this has P. Devil Combs written all over it. Once again, some people act like they don't understand why he's being indicted on what he's being indicted on, the charges that he's getting. Well, if you understand and you read up on and you research the actual definitions, what they actually mean, things like trafficking and racketeering, and then you read upon the things that he's done, you can see the overlap. You can see where they said, okay, yeah, you definitely done messed up here. For example, he had different businesses. Y'all know I have to say allegedly. And he may have used money that he made from those businesses to do things like host alleged freak-offs, where he had minors there. Remember what we were talking about? Whenever you're exploiting minors, even if you didn't coerce them, it still constitutes as trafficking and could extend into racketeering because he used his alleged business or funds from that business to do these illegal things. And remember, it also talked about the very general reach of what racketeering is when you're involved in very obscene matters and drug crimes. Those freak-offs alone could fall under that category. This is just me using deductive reasoning here and just putting two and two together. Him allegedly forcing people to be at the freak-offs, making them do things they did not want to do multiple times a night, night after night, allegedly. Having them forcibly under the influence. Him and this thing with the 2C. Like, that is absolutely crazy. And if that's not obscene, I don't know what is. Now, this article goes on to talk about the different forms of racketeering, the different forms that it can take, things I didn't even know myself. This is a very, very good read through. I encourage you all to actually read this article because it's some very eye-opening information. They also talk about all kinds of things at corporations, jobs you could even be working for right now, things that they could be doing within their corporation illegally that would actually fall under racketeering. Like I said, it's very eye-opening. It also talks about state racketeering versus federal racketeering because remember under the state, it would be XYZ. Under federal standards, it would be ABC, so to speak. So that also comes into play. Again, some people be forgetting that the reason why some people get so many years is because all of these different things, they fall under all these different categories. They check off all these different boxes without people really even knowing it. And that's not even scraping the surface of sometimes these charges are set up to where every time you did XYZ, that's one charge, X amount of time. That's how it racks up, so to speak. Like I said, give this article a read through. I'll put the information in the description box. I used to put links in the description box, but for whatever reason, YouTube would take them out. So that's why I just put the information in there. Like I said, I'll leave that down there for anybody who wants to educate themselves a little bit more on this subject. Now, moving on to the breaking news. Now, the lawyers of P. Devil Combs seemed like to me wanted to or tried to throw everything that they could like spaghetti at the wall to see what would stick. They were really trying to make it seem like the relationship between Cassie and P. Devil Combs was some kind of mutually abusive relationship. That, she's just doing this to get back at him. I mean, they were coming out of the woodwork with everything. And of course, they're not the first people to try to make it seem like Cassie was no victim, to make it seem like Kim Porter was not a victim, to make it seem like Dawn from Danity Kane, who just recently also filed a lawsuit, people like Lil Rod, were not victims. But here's what I have to ask for the people that are a little bit lacking in common sense when it comes to this situation. If it was a mutually abusive relationship, then why in the world didn't he let her leave when she tried to? If they were putting hands on each other, the moment she tried to escape from him at the hotel, why did he chase her down and throw her to the ground? And people were trying to make up some story and say, maybe she did something to him first. There is nothing that a woman could have done in a couple of seconds because she was trying to get the heck away from him. She was trying to get the heck out of Dodge. There's nothing she could have done to him, as small as she is and as big as he is, to warrant him running down a hallway, grabbing her and throwing her to the ground like a dog and dragging her through the corridor and throwing glass vases at her. If it was some kind of mutually abusive relationship, the first time she tried to walk away from him, he would have let her go. We all, the people with common sense and humane empathy, so to speak, we all know it was not a mutually abusive relationship because there have been multiple people saying that they saw P. Devil Combs beating Cassie, beating Kim Porter. People like Don, once again, who saw other men watch him do that to them and they did nothing. He was the primary and only aggressor in the situation. Multiple people have said that he issued threats to people who knew what he was doing, basically so that they wouldn't go and try to get help for Cassie. Once again, referencing the situation with Dawn. She saw Cassie being abused. She wanted to help Cassie. She was about to risk her life to try and help Cassie. He basically told her, I make people disappear. In other words, if you say anything, you might disappear. You might come up missing. You might be found in a ditch face down. Another way we know it wasn't a mutually abusive relationship for all those people, once again, who want to be raggedy. Whenever she tried to escape him back in the late 20-teens, if I'm not mistaken, and she was able to get away from him into her own apartment, and then he allegedly broke and entered and then R-worded her. Allegedly, because y'all know I have to say allegedly. But we all know the truth. Anyways, the federal authorities are the ones responsible for these charges. So once again, are people going to argue with the federal authorities? And we understand that they're not exactly, great people too, because y'all know I have to say allegedly. They knew about this while it was happening. They couldn't have not known, but only decided now because he done messed up to put this out there. And I'm glad that it's being put out there. I do believe that once somebody has gotten to that certain point, they will eventually face the consequences of their actions. I believe God has given everybody an amount of time to get things right. But if they take advantage of that, then once they get what's coming to them, nobody should really feel sorry for them. Especially not people like P. Devil Combs because of what he has done to people, allegedly. And I do believe some evil forces will take down other evil forces. It's just a matter of time. And then all evil will pay at the very end. Now, in the indictment, they listed and described basically everything that everybody has been talking about all this time. That's why nobody's really shocked. People have been labeling their videos, shocking new details. There's nothing new other than if they finally admit some stuff that we also know that we can't really talk about, that would be shocking. But all this stuff in the indictment, we already knew because he already been doing it, allegedly. People have already been trying to expose him. But we're going to go through it anyways. And I quote, Combs is accused of hitting, kicking, and throwing objects at victims, causing injuries that often took days or weeks to heal. The indictment alleges Combs also sometimes threw people or choked and shoved them and even dragged them by their hair. End quote. And we know this because we saw the video of him throwing the glass face at Cassie. We know this because we saw him grab her again by her hoodie, throw her to the floor, and then drag her across the floor after kicking her. The moment that he came back in there, she did what's called, what some people know as the freeze response. Some people call it the fawn. But to me, it was the freeze because she realized she wasn't about to be able to get away from him. There was no way she was going to be able to fight him back. The size difference, obviously. So she did the next best thing in her trauma response that she could think to do, which was to just lay there and prepare herself to be pummeled. And the reason why some people do this is because they think in the moment, they feel in the moment, blocking it out, tapping out psychologically, and just allowing whatever to happen to their body in the moment, if they allow it, that it'll be better off than if they try to fight back. They feel if they try to fight back or flee again, that the abuse will be worse. That is why they respond in that way. And it was very sad and disturbing to see that response when she did that, which means she was used to being abused. And when I say used to, I don't mean that in the way that some other people mean. Like, oh, well, she could take it because it happened so many times. When I say she was used to that happening, I mean this was the norm. For her to have that kind of response, that was the norm. Which again, is sickening to think about. It's disturbing. Prosecutors say his employees and associates witnessed his violence and rather than intervening, helped him cover it up, including by preventing victims from leaving and locating and contacting victims who attempted to flee. Again, an example with the Dawn lawsuit when she said she named Usher and Neo in the lawsuit and said they saw him doing stuff and they didn't even stop him. And what makes me angry is when people have the audacity to fix their raggedy mouths to say, oh, well, what were they supposed to do? It wasn't their responsibility to help Cassie. Why should they help her? She wasn't their wife, their girlfriend. Well, maybe because we were supposed to be a community. We're supposed to look out for each other. We see something going on. We're supposed to get help. You don't have to yell from the rooftops, I'm calling the police. You could be subtle with it. But this lack of empathy for our fellow man and woman is disgusting and it's disturbing and it has run amok in the community. And we wonder why people are the way that they are. And then when these people have to reap the consequences and they have to go through something and nobody wants to help them, they're the first people to cry out. Well, what did you do for other people whenever they needed help? And even if you're not in a position to help, at least don't be in a position to do worse, like help somebody cover up abuse. We can also apply this to that hotel that took money from him allegedly to keep that footage from surfacing. Once again, we all know it runs a little bit deeper than that. But oh my goodness, once again, why have enemies? You don't even need enemies when you have hotels that have security cameras that record people hurting people and then take hush money so that you can't get the justice that you're supposed to get. Another detail that people have been laughing it up about, that they put in this indictment that came out, the little extra detail, which I felt like whoever put that in there was low-key being petty, but I'm here for it all the way, that they found, and I quote, more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant, end quote. Who uses over 1,000 bottles of that stuff? Obviously somebody who's up to no good. I don't even believe that one person could go through 1,000 bottles, over 1,000 bottles of lubricant or baby oil for that matter in their lifetime unless they just really like to be oiled up all day, every day. So clearly some ungodly behaviors was going on in that mansion. The indictment once again talked about that hotel incident, and I quote, when a member of the hotel security staff intervened, the indictment said Combs attempted to bribe the staff member to ensure silence. Remember what we were talking about concerning racketeering, the bribery, even the attempt to do a crime, a specific crime. And I quote, the indictment says Combs gave victims drugs to keep them obedient and compliant and wielded his power and prestige to intimidate, threaten, and lure women into his orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship, end quote. Once again, it is very disgusting for anybody, man or woman, to do these kind of things, to lure people into a trap under the pretense of fake love. It's a very disgusting and low thing to do. And I quote, he exerted control over victims by promising career opportunities, providing and threatening to withhold financial support, dictating how they looked, monitoring their health records, and controlling where they lived, according to prosecutors, end quote. This has trafficking written all over it. This also reminds me of the Lil Rod lawsuit where he was basically showing him all these different men, trying to convince him to get in bed with him, even though he had already told P. Devil Combs he did not want to do these things. It's the constant disrespect of people's consent that just disturbs me. This also reminds me in the Lil Rod lawsuit of how he alleged, y'all know I have to say alleged, right? When he alleged that P. Devil Combs told him, oh, I can help you be producer of the year. I can get you that producer of the year award if you do X, Y, Z. That's that promising of career opportunities. And also when he basically allegedly didn't even pay him for the alleged years worth of work that he put in on that album that they were last working on. Yeah, withholding financial support. That's where that comes in. Once again, his lawyer was out here making these goofy behind statements, basically trying to make it seem like he's just some innocent man who's being taken advantage of, trying to be taken down by all these people who he didn't do anything to. Once again, we all know the truth. I've said this before, I'll say it again. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Not everybody is lying. It's hard to get caught up on some charges when you're not already out here doing things that could get you caught up on charges. And speaking of getting caught up doing things, they also talked about the freak-offs, the alleged freak-offs in the indictment. And I quote, prosecutors allege Combs used force, threats and coercion to get victims to engage in acts with male sex workers that he called freak-offs, which were often recorded and could last days. Combs' employees facilitated freak-offs by arranging travel, booking hotel rooms where they would take place, and stocking these rooms with supplies including drugs, baby oil, lubricants, extra linens, and lighting, scheduling the delivery of IV fluids, and then cleaning the rooms afterwards, the indictment said, end quote. Once again, remember what we were talking about? This goes back to the trafficking charges. Threatening people, coercing people, forcing people to participate in commercial sex acts, labor services. This falls under that category. And once again, if allegedly there were minors there, automatic trafficking. And that doesn't even include, or like I said, scrape the surface of the part with the drugs and them being recorded without their consent. And I quote, detailing allegations dating to 2008, the indictment accuses Combs of abusing, threatening, and coercing women for years to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. The indictment describes Combs as the head of a criminal enterprise engaged in or attempting to engage in activities including sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate transportation for purposes of prostitution, drug offenses, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Y'all, that was literally almost everything that was listed under racketeering. So once again, we're just equipping ourselves with a little bit of knowledge. We don't have a law degree. We didn't go to school for criminology 101, so to speak. But just with that little bit of information, people should understand now why he's getting the charges he's getting. Now, there are some things that came straight from the indictment. These are straight from the indictment papers. People have been gone through these on their YouTube channels. I will, like I said, put in the description box where you can find this. There are some things I wanted to point out straight from these indictment documents. They listed the amount of names this man has unnecessarily taken on over the years. And for him to even call himself Love, let's talk about that for a few seconds, is absolutely trash raggedy, because there's nothing about him or anything he's done to anybody that has love involved in any of it. This is that false love I was telling y'all about. Anyways, and I quote, the defendant engaged in a persistent and pervasive pattern of abuse towards women and other individuals. This abuse was at times verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual. As part of his pattern of abuse, Combs manipulated women to participate in highly orchestrated performances of sexual activity with male commercial sex workers. At times, Combs and others acting at his direction made arrangements for women and commercial sex workers to fly to Combs' location. Combs ensured participation from women by, among other things, obtaining and distributing narcotics to them, controlling their careers, leveraging his financial support and threatening to cut off the same, and using intimidation and violence. In another section of the indictment, it talks about, and I quote, the defendant used the Combs business, including certain employees, to carry out, facilitate, and cover up his abuse and commercial sex. These employees, including security staff, household staff, personal assistants, high-ranking supervisors, and other close associates, acted as Combs' intermediaries, and their conduct was facilitated and assisted by Combs' control of the Combs business. Once again, that's the end of the quote. Once again, using his business, alleged business, to do things he had no business doing, to do alleged illegal things. Those people who helped him, that also goes for the celebrities that helped him, that saw what happened and didn't do anything, that helped him do things to these people, to these young women, to the people who helped him cover it up. They all need to be exposed and thrown under the prison right along with him. When you think about it, this was a never-ending cycle that was feeding itself. He was using people, using their talents and skills, getting all this money from off of the work that they put in. We know this allegedly because of the Lil Rod lawsuit, where he said he alleged he didn't get paid. The young lady Dawn from Diddy Combs said that there were some things she didn't get paid for. All this money he was making, he was then using to facilitate this stuff, these illegal activities, and then threatening or bribing people to help him cover it up. It was a never-ending cycle, like I said, until he stepped on them toes that eventually led to this. Another thing to mention and point out, and I quote, preserving, protecting, promoting, and enhancing the power of Combs Enterprise, including the power of its leader, Combs, through violence, use of firearms, threats of violence, coercion, and verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. And the reason why I mention that is because the whole firearms part, remember, he was real trigger happy, allegedly. You have Natanya Rubin, who alleged that she was pow-powed, as they say, in the face by him back in the day, back in the 90s. And then Lil Rod mentioned in his lawsuit that he basically, P. Devil Combs, bragged to him about how he shot somebody in the face in a club. And Natanya Rubin came out and made a statement where she was saying, that's mighty interesting that he would say that, and he put that in the lawsuit. Because that incident that he was talking about allegedly was what happened to her. So again, after all of this, I don't see why people are not putting two and two together here. Also with the incident where Lil Rod had in his lawsuit where he allegedly shot a guy in the bathroom of a studio because they got into a disagreement and then chalked it up to a drive-by. Remember what we were talking about? The acts of violence, the actual act of violence, the attempted crimes, because the federal authorities could have chalked that up to an attempted deletion. More charges. Now it also talks about all of those drugs that he had all these people involved with when he brought them to his place, wherever he was going, the hotel, and had these people high out of their minds. What I was shocked to find out and realize people don't know that people need to know, and if you don't, you know now, because I'm telling you, no functionally minded individual who's not always thinking about sex and who they can have it with the next time they can have it is just going to be in the mindset, the mind state, if you will, to be going around screwing one person, then another person, then that same person, then another person, time after time after time, multiple times a night for multiple nights in a row. Because remember in the indictment, it alleged that he would have these freak-offs going on for days. The only way to keep a person in that kind of mind state is to always, constantly have them high on drugs. And once again, there were people talking about these drugs that he was allegedly using. Jaguar White spoke about this on one of these podcasts, on one of these YouTube channels, about this combination of drugs that he had people, once again, high out of their minds on, that kept them numb, dulled emotionally, very aroused, constantly, and very high. And so that they can continuously, night after night after night, keep doing these things. It needs to be mentioned and brought up that this is how people, a lot of these people on OnlyFans, these people who participate in sex work, this is how they continue doing these things. People keep forgetting, especially with women, it's really bad for women. Because no, once again, functionally minded woman is going to be able to have sex with that many men, that many times, that many nights in a row. Unless they are high on something that is keeping them in that mind frame. That's the only way it's going to happen. That's why so many of them are really miserable. That's why a lot of them end up committing self-deletions. It's either because they accidentally overdose so they can numb themselves and only feel the pleasure of what they're doing, or because they're tired of the numbness. There's no amount of arousal or them feeling good in these types of situations that's going to override the emptiness that they are feeling, that they're trying to feel with what they're doing, or them being passed around against their will, because that's what's happening to some of them. There's no amount of what they're feeling in that moment that's going to cover that up or solve the numbness of having multiple bed partners, being passed around, having sex with all these different people, introducing all of these different spirits into their bodies because of who they're laying down with. This is what makes this all the more disturbing and really upsetting and sad. It needs to be called out. People need to be calling some attention to it. Anyways, I'm going to wrap up this video by pointing a few other things out. A lot of people have been labeling P. Devil Combs basically the music / hip hop / black version of the guy whose last name rhymes with Lepstein. For some reason, we can't even say it on social media without risk of backlash because of the algorithm and the censorship. Once again, these people getting to these high places, I was talking to somebody about this before, not too long ago. These celebrities get into these high places. Some people were saying maybe he's just doing to people what was done to him. He put himself in those positions because he wanted to be up there doing what these other people, who don't look like him, mind you, were doing, because he was so desperate to be there. He was so desperate to be a gatekeeper. He was so desperate to get the money and the fame. But he chose to do it. And he also chose to take it out on other people. He also chose to victimize other people. So we're not putting up with any sob stories where P. Devil Combs is concerned. We're not giving him any excuses. He took the money and the power that he got from very rich people, and he used it to hurt people, especially people who look like him. Once again, I've said this before. These people like P. Devil Combs who go and they hurt people within their own community, commit horrible and atrocious crimes within their own communities. But then these people want to sit up and support them. Oh, y'all just trying to bring a black man down. I don't want to hear anybody ever say that phrase ever again. Because every time it's used to defend somebody like him who has done horrible things and has also brought other black people, black men, black women down as well. Once again, all of the enablers, the people who helped him get away with what he did, helped him in his businesses to get money to be able to fund the things he was doing, the illegal activities, the people who gave him the money and the power and the positions, they need to be put in prison right along with him. But we know that that's not going to happen, especially if they look a certain kind of way. All them other celebrities who sat by and watched them women get abused, the men get abused, the alleged children get abused, they all need to be held accountable as well. I done said before, if anything, we should be a community. You don't get to sit up and watch somebody beat somebody like a dog and not say anything and then say, oh, well, I was this, that, or the other. No, sir, no, ma'am. All of the people who helped him threaten people, all of the alleged cops that was on his payroll that made it to where people could not go to the authorities, especially the local authorities, to report him for what he did. That hotel and whoever was in charge of burying that video or taking the alleged hush money needs to be held accountable as well. People can sit up and say, oh, he's P. Diddy this, like it wasn't their responsibility that. I don't care. They need to be held accountable. Because see, then when we tried to say that people like Don and Cassie couldn't get away because they were being threatened, then everybody wants to say that they had no excuse, that they should have left. I don't think so. We're not going to play those games. That's disgusting to even say, especially about a victim. All the people who aided him, like Stevie J and Young Miami, also need to face consequences. We talked a little bit about him basically trying to call out some of the men who are coming out to file lawsuits, basically trying to disrespect them, low-key trying to threaten them is what it came off to me. Because people like Lil Rod came out and filed these lawsuits against P. Devil Combs. Once again, Carisha, please, Little Miss Carisha, please, Young Miami, she needs to face consequences because not only did she throw her friend under the bus because she wasn't woman enough to just admit she was too untalented and lazy to go back into the studio and make music with her friend who wanted to make music with her because she wanted to sit up and be a glorified whore for P. Diddy. But she also set up and publicly threatened to force another woman to go down on her with P. Diddy. That's got to have some charges behind it somewhere. I've said this before. Whenever she went to Twitter and threatened to make Gina Wynn get on her knees, that's low-key. Basically, you threatening to R-word somebody is the way I see it. And even if it wasn't that, it's still illegal. She needs to face some kind of charges because allegedly that's the same thing he was making people do to other people. And lastly, for all these people who keep getting on the internet, especially showing their faces and trying to call these victims extortionists and saying that these people are lying or just trying to get money from him, downplaying and minimizing the hell that those people went through, both the men and the women, they need lawsuits put on them as well. In my very humble opinion, I feel like that is defamation, and if not defamation, definitely emotional damages. It is most certainly, you better bet your bottom dollar, emotionally damaging for a victim after everything he or she has been through to have to see these people on the internet who don't know them, who was not there when they went through the horrible things that they went through, having to listen to them tell the entire world or anybody who will listen that they're just trying to extort P. Devil Combs for money. That's an absolute slap in the face and spit in the face to those victims. But anyways, this was a lot, but it was a discussion that we had to have. Shout out to anybody who actually lasted this long throughout the video. You're the real MVP. Anyways, y'all let me know what y'all think about all of this down in the comments below respectfully. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Y'all all have a very blessed, beautiful, and safe day.